Well, good afternoon, guys. On this August 6th, it's about 12:40 right now, and I'm at the Deseret Peak trailhead. I want to try and make this as quick as possible, so I'm going to start hiking right now, and let's just see what we can find. Now, Deseret Peak is in the Stansbury Mountains, which, if you don't know, is a Great Basin mountain range about maybe 50 miles west of the Wasatch. It's like the second mountain range west of the Wasatch, so if you're heading west from there, you first encounter the Ocher Mountains. And then after that, it's the Stansbury Mountains. They go up to about 11,000 feet. The highest peak being, of course, Deseret Peak. So named for the Mormon name for this area. Deseret is supposed to be an old Hebrew word, I don't know. But either way, the flora here should be fairly similar to the Wasatch, but with some notable differences that we'll see. Just coming up right now so far, what I've noticed is a lot of the trees are the same, although I haven't seen any white fir or Abies concolor. I've seen quite a lot of Pseudotsuga menziesii and Douglas fir, quite a lot of Quaking Aspen, the Populus tremuloides, which you can see right in front of us, of course. Classic tree, quite common throughout the Great Basin. There's a sort of trend of distribution of plants in there that I'm going to get into a little later, but for right now, just know that the further west you go, the less common Rocky Mountain species will be, which I guess makes sense, but there's a sort of pattern. And there's also, I've seen a lot of Bigtooth Maple, the Acer grandidentatum, as it's called scientifically, which you can maybe see some of here, although it might be above its normal range. Definitely not a box elder, Acer negundo. You have a specimen right here as well. I hope this video is very clear. I'm trying to make a conscious effort to not be huffing and puffing so much because I've been pointing out that I breathe really deeply and loudly into the mic as I film and hike, so I'm going to try and reduce that and try to speak more clearly. But yeah, let's just carry on. So right here is a good example of wildflower that can be found typically in the Rockies, at least I think typically in the Rockies, but not much further west from there. It is Delphinium occidentale, very tall species of Delphinium, of course. However, toxic genus, you can see its leaves. Those are a good feature to try and identify them by. And of course, they have a very typical Delphinium or Larkspur flowers with the one nectar spur from the sepals growing back like that. And this is a plant you won't really find in the Great Basin, but because this mountain range is so close to the Great Basin, you can still find them growing here. And that's an important thing to note about Great Basin plants, because you see, as you move west in the Rocky Mountains into the Great Basin, the plants you can find in the Rockies very quickly drop off in distribution. So by the time you reach Nevada, there's typically very few you'll find, very few Rocky Mountain plants you'll find still growing in the various mountains of the Great Basin. Even just being 50 miles west of the Wasatch, which is the westernmost range of the Rocky Mountains at its particular latitude. So the Ochers are not part of the Rocky Mountains. Well, some people might consider them. But the Stansbury Mountains definitely are not. They are solidly one of the ranges of the Great Basin. And because of that, plants are going to drop off you're not going to find the same plants as you can find in the Wasatch here. Like I already said, you can't find Abies concolor as far as I'm aware. You probably can't find a few other trees. And I'm sure you'll find some other good examples of plants you can't find elsewhere. I mean, just because I don't find them doesn't mean they're totally absent, but there's definitely a pattern you can find here. So the central Great Basin mountains can be quite depauperate, quite lacking in species. Although once you get to the really western Great Basin, you start to get some more Sierra Nevada type species, like some mountain ranges there. But still, it's going to be quite a lot less diverse than the Sierra Nevada is. The Florida Sierra Nevada is definitely quite different from that of the Rocky Mountains, even though they share a few species, I guess. Of course, Quaking Aspen is an example of a tree that you can find very commonly in pretty much all mountain ranges in the Great Basin. It distributes itself very easily with, I think, seeds that are borne aloft on wind. And wow, this is so hard to breathe and breathe quietly and talk at the same time. Whew. I probably need to work on my cardio. But yeah, It's a great example of a tree you can find quite commonly in the Great Basin mountain ranges, the Quaking Aspen. While the Douglas fir example, one that you're only find really in the very westernmost of the Great Basin mountain ranges, or sorry, easternmost I should say, the ones just west of the Rocky Mountains. So here you'll find some, you can find some all the way to Great Basin National Park in Nevada, but beyond that, you're not going to find it very commonly. And Great Basin is quite large, it's about I think 500 miles across, so quite a lot of not much of anything growing out there. I mean, some of them don't even really have any conifer species or any tree species aside from some aspens and junipers and maybe not even limber pines. So you'll find sagebrush like in the Santa Rosa Mountains growing all the way to the top. There's another one you can find in the Wasatch. Thalictrum fendleri. I believe it's Fendler at least. It's growing quite healthily, which is nice to see. And up here, this is either Rosa nucana or Rosa woodsii. That flower is a little hard to tell, but by this elevation, it could be either or. We're about 7,600 feet. Now, let's see what else there is. Now, of course, right here is another classic on my channel. This is Balsamorhiza sagitatta. It's grown quite late into the season to have green leaves like this, but you know, it is higher up, about 8,000 feet now. Plus, right here is Agastache urticifolia, I believe. Actually, no, it could be something else, but it looks a lot like it. Definitely a mint family member with its square stem and opposite leaves. You know, I'm noticing actually quite a lot of plants here that are, you find the Wasatch, way more as expected, in fact. But there definitely is a taper, as I said, when you move west into the Great Basin of Rocky Mountain plants, and attenuation, as I like to call it. Find a couple others in a second. Saw Eucephalus engelmannii quite recently. Several of them. These mountains do seem maybe be a little bit drier than the Wasatch, visibly, to me at least. Of course, that's just my subjective opinion, but there you go, that's the Eucephalus I was talking about, or one of them. Proof it grows here. But that's another thing to know. As you get west into the Great Basin, of course the rainfall drops off a lot, even in the mountains, even the really tall ones. It doesn't help the mountain ranges tend to be thinner than in the Rockies. And they go, so the distance between across the mountain range is going to be smaller and the basin's wider, but still it's a bit shocking and maybe jarring to what might be expected. I shouldn't slag off the Great Basin too much, speak. It can be a biodiverse region at times, and there's quite a few cases of endemic plants and animals in the various ranges of the Great Basin. But it's hard to deny that they are less biodiverse than the actual Rocky Mountain or Sierra Nevada proper. Now, what view that is, it's hard to see. It's the Great Salt Lake, Antelope Island, even the Wasatch in the background. So that's just the foothills of the Yokers. Dang, I can't turn on the ISO anymore. But I can make it darker, I guess. There you go. Anyways, around here, some more plants you can find in the Wasatch as well as here. This is Lomatium graveolens. This really feathery looking plant here. It seems to be the most common high elevation, large Lomatium you'll find, at least in my part of the Wasatch, as well as here, I guess. It might be a common Great Basin species, I couldn't tell you. As well as the Orthocarpus luteus. Both plants I believe I talked about in my last video. I don't know, I haven't uploaded it and edited it yet. I kind of forgot what I said because it was a very tough hike. But it probably won't be as tough as this one is. I believe that is where I'm heading. Maybe actually, it might be even higher up than that actually. It's like about 3,000 feet of elevation gain to grow. Beautiful place. I think it might be a bunch of limestone and quartzite up here making these mountains. I know limestone is quite common in the Great Basin, which is formed by, sort of California and the Rocky Mountains being stretched apart from each other, causing the rocks to fold and get quite thin, the crust to get quite thin, producing mountain ranges in the process, and the valleys in between have been since filled up with a lot of sediment as this process continues to happen. So like apparently the salt flats in some places. The Bonneville salt flats can be up to about, like 8,000 feet thick with sediment, because that's so well below sea level, like 4,000 feet below sea level. It would be Hollywood as if that never happened. All right, I'm gonna carry on. Okay, now to show that there are even more species you can find here, and you can also find the Wasatch and broader Rocky Mountains. We have quite a lot here. Firstly, this is Polemonium foliosissimum. Don't really need to talk too much about it. We also have, of course, the Rudbeckia occidentalis. It's a big cone flower right there. I'll get a better shot in a second. There we go. Always appreciated. And the Aconitum columbianum, commonly known as the Western Monkshood. The only species I love what their flowers look like, and I also think it's really cool how toxic it is. In fact, I don't even want to touch it, it's so toxic. Heracleum maximum, commonly called cow parsnip. Really big specimen growing right there. Quite nice. But here's a new one I haven't talked about. I have seen it in the Wasatch, but never had a good chance to talk about it. Probably best gonna find it right here. This little guy is Mimulus lewisii. Looks quite a lot like the, or sorry, I should actually say Erythronthri lewisii, because they all been moved to a different genus, or the genus Mimulus has been split up. But it's the one with the pink flowers here, unlike the Erythronthri guttata, which has yellow flowers. It's probably the second most common monkey flower you'll find in the Wasatch, and at least just Rocky Mountains in Utah, I should say. And you can clearly find it here in the Stansbury Mountains as well. This plant typically grows alongside water. What I've noticed here is that all these plants, but we typically grow in more wetter meadows in the Wasatch. That seems to be not necessarily like wet meadows per se, but most ones have more moisture and don't get super dry in the summer. These ones are all growing alongside streams where I've seen them in the Stansbury Mountains so far. So it seems that the lack of rainfall here makes these plants need proper riparian habitat to survive, which is a little interesting to say. There's also this unidentified Apiaceae member. I can't really tell what it is right now. I'll try and figure it out later. But that one I also haven't really identified before. But either way, all this aside, oh yeah, there's some geraniums too. Richardsonii or Viscosinium almost certainly. But yeah, all these plants you can only find growing easily in just slightly wetter than average meadows, like on north-facing slopes. But here they clearly need a riparian habitat to survive, so that's a bit interesting. Now, one thing that is really different here compared to the Wasatch is that there's these really large fields and whole mountainsides covered in sagebrush primarily, with some of our wildflowers, like, I don't know what that is, but you get some erigerons and this lupinus is pretty common. I'm guessing it's probably Lupinus argenteus, so it could be Sericius or just one other, that are hard to tell apart from a little bit of species complex there. But you don't really see that in the Wasatch so much, and I don't know if it's just because this place is drier or because there was some deforestation a while ago and it just hasn't recovered since then. More of that Eucephalus engelmannii, I believe. I could be wrong about that is. I'm not 70% confident that's what that species is. That's where we're heading next. Okay, now we're about 9,500 feet, getting well into the alpine, or like a subalpine. There's a few more species we can find, all of which I'm pretty sure you can find in the Wasatch. Firstly, this is Ericomeria discoidea, known as with discoid rabbit brush. It's quite similar to Ericomeria nauseosa. If you look closely, and one feature you can see is that it's got these very white branches with this same soft downy substance on them, the same downy hairs that give the illusion of the branches being pure white, as with the rubber rabbit brush, the Ericomeria nauseosa. Of course, for trees we have Pinus flexilis, the limber pine, quite common actually in the Great Basin, as well as Aves lasiocarpa, the alpine fir. Not sure we have any Engelmann spruce up here. I'll have to see later. Aves lasiocarpa is also fairly common in the upper Great Basin. Now we have some wildflowers again. Selene douglasii, commonly known as the Douglas catchfly. I think that's the most common species of Selene you'll find around here. Definitely you can find the Wasatch. Of course, some of these, hopefully you can find some in bloom. For Phocera speciosa, a monocarpic species, meaning it only blooms once in its life, after which it dies, but may produce some suckers that continue to live on. So yeah, really there's quite a lot to be said that's similar just between here and the Wasatch. That didn't quite make much sense, but I have a theory about that, which I'll get to in a second, but first I want to keep hiking. So more about Phocera speciosa really quick. So remember the family Gentianaceae. It's really the only Gentian genus I know around here, although I'm sure there's others. I just need to study the family more. Oh, a nice little Senecio too. I'm not sure which it is though, so let's just carry on up that way. Well, there you go. Definitive proof that Picea engelmannii, the Engelmann spruce, actually does grow in the Stansbury Mountains. See a scaly bark. Okay, time to move on. Well, there you go. We got the Ribes montagineum as well. Yeah, another Wasatch plant that I was a little shocked to find here. But less so the more I think about it. Now this is a little sad to see, but it's just what happens sometimes. You can see the effect of a really devastating wildfire down there. And evidently it's from a wildfire 15 years ago, in 2009, the big pole fire, which burned almost 50,000 acres in Skull Valley and in the Stansbury Mountains. Quite a shame. It doesn't seem like there's been much recovery from that. But it's a little hard to tell. I can't see all the way down there. Must have burned a lot of junipers and Douglas firs. I even seen some limber pines close to the tree, the ridgeline here that have been burned. Well, I guess that's nature for you, but it's probably going to take a long time, maybe centuries to recover from. Well, the plus side here is a nice Proceras speciosa actually in bloom right now. That's always fun to see. This is there. We're almost there. That's our final target. Maybe a place a little bit behind it. Turned out to be a little bit further than I thought, but I'm almost to the top. So you're definitely above whatever tree line exists here. I thought there'd be more shrubs up here, perhaps. This must be it. Deseret Peak, 11,031 feet. Wow. See a lot of stuff up here. More of that devastation from the Pole Canyon fire. Might be a little bit tricky to see, but I can definitely see a lot of burnt trees there. It looks so much burnt because the bark's fallen off by now, but it's been burnt, but they're definitely dead. You can see down there what happened as well. This is definitely on the west side of the Stansbury Mountains, not the east side, which I think is mostly unaffected. You can see which is the south-facing slope, and which is that south-facing, and that's north-facing. You see, it looks like it goes very flat bottom, that valley down there. Maybe a little bit of little U-shaped, a little glacier action helps shape it. I don't really know what other plants you can find up here. Have some eriogonums and other things, but yeah, I'm happy to be up here now. There's a little geographic indicator. Now, one more thing I want to talk about as I head down is why is the Flora, the Great Basin Mountains, so depauperate compared to that of the Rockies and the Sierra Nevada, both of which sandwich the Great Basin? And that's to do with a couple things. Firstly, the rainfall is a lot lower in the Great Basin, the precipitation in general. So at a given elevation, let's say 8,000 feet, if you're in the Wasatch Range or anywhere in the Rockies or the Sierra Nevada, it's going to have a higher precipitation generally at that elevation than at 8,000 feet in the Great Basin mountain ranges. Right here it's not so bad, but as you get further into the Great Basin, it gets increasingly worse and worse. And yeah, some of those mountain ranges, even though they get above 10,000 feet, will have more than like 20 inches of rain, which is quite impressive actually. It's a very dry place, very inhospitable. The second thing has to do with the fact that it's really hard for plants to distribute themselves across all these valleys to get to the central Great Basin. If you're a montane plant or an alpine plant, you can't just grow in like the valleys typically. You have to have your seeds distributed across the valley somehow, and it can be by wind, which is actually how some plants do it. Well, most plants do not distribute their seeds by wind. So if that's not the case, then you have to find another way, be it clinging to the fur of an animal or the feathers of a bird, or maybe getting stuck in some mud that's attached to the foot of a bird or on a deer or something like that, or passing through the digestive tract of a different animal, which that can be quite tricky for alpine plants. You have to really, really go quite far to do that successfully. And as a result, going to each mountain range, it gets harder and harder for a plant to distribute itself. So let's say from the Rockies to the Ochres, that might not be so hard because just one jump, but any plant to do that first has to then have its population established. It's like to have to distribute itself across from the Wasatch to the Ochres. And then from there, you have to go to Stansbury. And then after that, it can get even trickier because the next mountain range over, Cedar Mountains, right there, doesn't have any montane habitat. So plants that are adapted to the montane, they're not going to find any habitat to grow there. It's going to get above 7,000 feet. The next mountain range has to hop all the way across to the next mountain range, which is the Deep Creek Range. Might be a little hard to see here. So again, it's way out in the distance. I don't know if you can really see it very well, but it's actually quite a cool one. It's over 12,000 feet in elevation. It's like the third or fourth highest mountain range in Utah, and one of only 4 that gets above 12,000 feet. Quite neat in my opinion, but anyways, I digress. So having to cross these far distances, it gets increasingly unlikely that plants are actually going to be found or have made that leap, even over the thousands or even millions of years that they've had to do it. So as a result, as you get further into the Great Basin, plants just get less and less, just less and less diverse overall, and the floor of the Rockies becomes less and less important. Though this is not such a bad thing. This can lead to some fairly high levels of endemism. In some cases, I mean, not super high, but there's definitely, a lot of these mountain ranges have at least a few endemic plants, like the Snake Range, which is what Great Basin National Park protects. And even though it's only been about 10,000 years since the last ice age ended, and plants are still, the whole order of is still being reestablished after that. There's still quite a lot of endemics already, and there's surely more to come as the years roll by. So that'll be long after we have all died, of course. I should also mention this applies to the Sierra Nevada. In general, the Great Basin, even though I just kind of said there's not a lot of plants you can find in the Rocky Mountains there, the affinity is definitely much more about the Rocky Mountains than that is Sierra Nevada, unless you get really close to the Sierra Nevada, like in the White Pine Mountains, or it's called White Mountains. I think it's called White Mountains. The Inyo Mountains, or like the Panamint Range, both might have a much more a Sierra Nevada affinity to them. The floor of the Sierra Nevada and Rockies are quite different. I don't know if I said that earlier, but it's worth restating. There's very few plants that have in common, though there's a lot of genera in common. Alright, I think that about wraps it up, so thanks for watching and see you next time, guys. Now that's quite a forest, at least for the Great Basin. Nice tall trees. You're less likely to find this when you get out west to the Great Basin. And even hiking up, seems like most of the forests are pretty sparse, so this is a nice dense one. So I'm excited to explore that. There's possibly right here. Thanks for watching and see you next time, but let's see what else we find. One more plant today just because it looks so nice. Another Wasatch plant you can find in the Stansbury Mountains, or perhaps we should call it a Stansbury Mountain plant you can also find in the Wasatch. This is Sambucus racemosa, the red elderberry. Should be easy to see why it's quite red. This is of the 2 species you find around here, the more high elevation one typically. Do you want to see what they taste like? Want to see me try them? Never mind. They tasted good for a second, but those are actually kind of gross. God. Look very pretty though. So not for real. Thanks for watching and see you next time.